I kept mocking him at our friend's wedding party until he got fed up and said this.
I never imagined that my first time on Reddit would be to seek advice on my broken marriage and what to do with my vengeful husband. My desire to have risky fun and mock my marriage has left me in the worst possible situation. My AP and I made a huge scene of mocking my husband at our friend's pre-wedding party, and in return, my husband acted out of spite and ruined my image in front of over 150 people. I do not think I can ever recover from what that man has done to me. But do you know what might be worse? What my AP and I did to him? It was not planned by my AP, but it was definitely embarrassing, and my husband didn't take it lightly at all. Please, I do not want to be told that I had this coming. Since when did a little bit of fun have to be so consequential? Just like my username displays, I wish to be called Miley. I'm 30 years old and I have been married for just 3 years. My husband, however, is 2 years younger than me. He is an entrepreneur and I am a baker. The age difference between Darian, my husband, and I is the main reason I married him, to be honest. I wanted to marry a man I could control and wrap under my finger because I didn't want to be controlled. I met Darian from our friend group years ago. We were just friends before it casually turned into a relationship that led to marriage. I had eyes for someone else in the group, but I didn't date him because I felt like he was too controlling and irrational. Apart from his behavior, my friends never liked him. Of course, even in the friend group, we had cliques, and my clique wasn't his biggest fan. I thought it was just jealousy at first because, to be honest, he's kind of living fine, but I then discovered that there might be more to it. His name is Fred, by the way, and even though a lot of the men were threatened by him, they couldn't say otherwise because he literally paid for all our trips. But after my marriage to Darian, my crush for Fred didn't go away. Of course, I felt nothing for him during the early weeks of my marriage because I was still stuck on the honeymoon vibes. That is until 1 year after my marriage when we met again. Darian and I decided to see our friends after a long time, and we went to a club to see them. Fred and I always flirted with each other before, and it almost became a problem when I started dating Darian, but I made him understand that there was nothing between Fred and I. Darian believed me after he noticed the distance I gave Fred, and that's how that scandal didn't live to see the light of day. But when I met Fred at the club, I knew there was going to be trouble in my marriage. Don't get me wrong, marriage with Darian isn't bad. The only problem is that no matter how okay our marriage was, I kept thinking about Fred whenever I saw him. I wrote it off as a normal crush at first, but with time I began to understand that it was starting to be lust. Darian has always been a reserved, hardworking, and normal guy. He's what girls would describe as a safe option, and that's why I went for him. He's respectful and reasonable and doesn't disrespect me. I chose him because I thought I could live easily with him. But then I discovered that even with my marriage to Darian, I couldn't stop thinking about Fred, and that's where the problem began. Now Fred is my biggest nightmare, and I am more scared of him and the thought of ever having anything to do with him. Back then, it was even harder to keep my feelings a secret considering the fact that we were all in the same friend group. Fred, on the other hand, didn't care that I was married and needed boundaries. He kept stealing glances at me and flirting once in a while. Well, in his defense, I didn't do anything to stop him from flirting. Instead, all I did was encourage him and give him green lights. At first, I thought that it was just harmlessly fun, but I had no idea that the risky, flirtatious gestures were getting noticed by a lot of people. I had no idea that with each boundary I crossed with Fred, my marriage suffered a painful blow. I managed to keep things platonic until our second wedding anniversary, where I discovered that Darian had been harboring a lot of questions. He was very confrontational that day when he asked me if I was aware that people were whispering behind our backs. Of course, I already knew that, so I tried to gaslight him and make it seem as though he was exaggerating. But I didn't get the reaction I expected out of him. He didn't find my actions funny at all. Instead, Darian made it clear that he would not tolerate any form of cheating or disrespect. I will not lie, guys. I was deeply shocked. I had never been on the receiving end of Darian's anger until that day. I never expected the level of rage he showed. When I saw how he reacted, I knew that it was a sign to take a step back and not play with him. Even though I was already smitten with lust for Fred at that stage, I knew that I would choose my marriage over him. The truth is that no matter how much one wants to cheat, your rational mind still tries to save you. I knew that Fred wasn't ready to commit and that risking my marriage for him would just be stupid. But that didn't stop me from flirting with him. It just made me smarter at it. I didn't want to stop, but I also didn't want to be caught. The truth is that there was nothing missing in my marriage except from the lust and risk that flirting with Fred gave. Darian has never been a bad husband. To be honest, I think his only fault is the fact that he is too kind. I did play with his trust, and I will not lie about that. That is why I didn't expect him to suddenly turn on me and deal with me so mercilessly. Now please don't get this mixed up. I never actually slept with Fred until 6 months ago. We did flirt once in a while, but it never really got to that intimate part until one particular night. To be honest, I thought I was so smart and discreet with my movements. That's why I delayed the intimate part for so long. I wanted it to happen so naturally that we weren't socially awkward after it and it didn't raise suspicious. I also wanted to make sure that Fred was worth it. Believe me or not, I did care. Even though I had been filled with lust, I still had a working head that questioned what I was doing. Eventually, Fred and I finally slept together for the first time. I didn't expect it to have any effect on my marriage, but it did. Darian definitely suspected something wasn't right. I don't know if it was the way I acted with him or if it was the way I was being discreet. I could tell that he had his suspicions, but the thing is that he never confronted me about it. One thing about Darian is that he likes to be sure before he acts. And Jay think that's what went down in our marriage. I noticed that he withdrew a lot and stopped being a gentleman precisely. There was just this weird aura and weird behavior he gave off. He stopped getting me gifts and stopped putting in effort in our date nights and couple conversations. In fact, let me out it simply that he stopped caring. It was almost like I was the one who started chasing him in the relationship and not the other way around. We were living in the same house, but there wasn't that spark to it. If you're wondering why I cared, then you just be joking. When I decided to cheat, I didn't cheat because I wanted to end my marriage. I just cheated because I needed the fun and risky feeling. Fred was just a phase for me, a few minutes pleasure whenever we met. I still wanted to feel married and happy, so when I didn't have that, I panicked. I panicked and decided to speak to Darian about it. I asked him if there was a problem, and I did it so confidently that I didn't expect the turnaround of events. I went to him thinking I would come out of the conversation as the winner, but instead Darian shocked me. I'm fact, GE threatened me. He told me that he had been hearing a lot of side talks about me, but was taking his time to find the truth. He then proceeded to warn me not to dare cross him or try to play smart with him. I was so scared that I ran to Fred the next day to tell him everything. I expected Fred to just casually tell me not to worry, and that he would be by my side if I eventually ended my marriage with Darian. But all he said was that there was no need to be scared, and that Darian was just being immature. Fred made me believe that there was no need to take Darian seriously. Now that I think about it, the joke was on Fred because I think both of us now know what Darian is capable of. I also think that I was the biggest fool for underestimating my husband. I guess I kept referencing to our 2 years ago GSP, and that made me feel superior in some way. I completely forgot that a man will always be a man even if you were born 2 years earlier than him. Darian always suspected something was up and he knew I wasn't to be trusted. And so instead of sitting back and doing nothing, he waited for the right time to mess me up. He did, and I'll just say this simply. He messed me up real bad. So you might want to ask, what are you even talking about? How did he mess you up? Well, it all started from our friend's pre-wedding party. Just 3 weeks ago, we got a wedding invite from a very good friend of ours. It was arranged to be a 5-day experience with various events lined up until the main wedding. Just like I said, the invite came from a very good friend of ours, so there was no way we were going to say no. Of course, we were busy with work and we're still trying to have a normal marriage, but we squeezed in time somewhere in between. From the get-go, I knew it was going to be a very bad idea. Destination wedding in New York? What could go wrong? A lot of things. I just knew that it wouldn't end well, especially because Fred would be in attendance. We were all in the same friend group, so there was no party without either one of us. There were signs of how dreadful things could become, but I was too stupid to notice it or even take a smart step. Can you believe that a night before we traveled, Darian sat me down and warned me against any form of disrespect? I got upset and asked him what he was insinuating, and he simply told me this: "Do not dare try to make a fool of me in front of anyone, or else you will regret marrying me." I got very offended, but I refused to be dramatic. I just played along because at that point, I was in need of the vacation, and I felt like I would burst of boredom if I didn't go for the wedding. Of course, Darian was paying for the trip, so the last thing in my list was to disrespect him. When we got to New York and checked into the hotel, I sneaked out one night to tell Fred about Darian's threat. It wasn't something I planned for. I was just so bored that it slipped out. I didn't expect Fred to do anything. It was just something I put out there for no reason. But obviously my delusion and lack of awareness for my environment was what made me so out of touch with reality. I mean, what was I even expecting? That's what I think about now that I look back at everything. It is common knowledge that men have huge egos and do not like to be seen as small or incapable. What they hate more is being belittled by another man. I had no idea that Fred's huge ego would lead him to making a fool out of the both of us. He didn't show that he wanted to embarrass Darian, but I could tell that he didn't like the fact that Darian's words had an impact on me. I mean, common. Of course I feared Darian a little, but that happened to be something Fred hated. He didn't like that I took Darian seriously, so he decided to make a fool out of Darian instead. You might also want to ask, how did he do that? Well, he did that by using me, of course, and I fell into the trap like a common rat. Out of the 5 days of wedding events, there was a pre-wedding party that was organized on the third day. Darian and I had attended the first 2 days' events together, and there was no drama. That's mostly because I earned Fred not TK try anything funny. But on the day of the pre-wedding party, Fred asked me to come see him at the restroom. It was risky, but I sneaked into the restroom to see him. He told me he missed me and asked me to dance with him that night. I already had a few drinks by then, so I was tipsy and excited. I agreed to dance with him and did just that. Not in a million years did I think that Fred had any ulterior motive behind that dance request. But he did. He had attached something to my collar while we were making out in the restroom, but I paid no attention to it. When I asked, he said it was nothing. Like I said, I was tipsy, so I didn't care. I danced with Fred and didn't bother looking for Darian. I didn't even bother checking to see if he was watching. The dance started off innocent, but then Darian started touching too much, and then he was basically groping me. I didn't do anything to stop him. I had no idea that we had gathered a crowd and that all eyes were on us, including Darian. But out of nowhere, Fred started talking about Darian. He called him weak and dramatic and insinuated that he wasn't man enough. I foolishly agreed and dissed Darian. Well, that was until I discovered that something was off. A few seconds into the conversation, I noticed that the music stopped. Most people stopped dancing and I could hear my voice. No, I know it's not weird to hear one's voice, but I heard mine too loudly. It took me a minute, if just standing there blankly like a fool, to realize that our conversation was heard by everyone in the room. How? Well, that's Fred had attached a mic to both of us. I was still tipsy, but I knew something was off. I decided to touch my neck and take it off, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Before I could blink, I felt water all over my body. I fell on the floor due to the shock. While I was trying to understand what was going on, I realized that Darian and Fred were practically punching each other. I screamed because that was all I could do at that moment. No one cared about my state of distress or even offered to pull me off the floor. No one in our friend group even tried to help me. I could understand that the couple were upset that we were causing a scene, but what of the rest? It was extremely embarrassing. I got to my feet and tried to tell them to stop, but instead they pushed me on the floor. Finally, I got fed up and tried to leave, but that's when the drama came. I got the shock of my life when police officers walked into the hall and walked right towards us. By that time, Darian had stepped away from Fred and acted like the both of them weren't just involved in a tussle. I can still remember the words clear. "You are under arrest." I swear I laughed, because of course I couldn't believe it. Fred was the rational one who asked why, because the officers faced both of us. Nothing in the world prepared me for this statement. Possession of drugs. Yes, I know you had to read that again. I also had to do a double take. I do not take drugs, hell, I've only had 2 smokes in my life and I hated it. So to be in a new state and be told that I was under arrest for the possession of drugs was bluff. But no kidding, it was true. I was actually handcuffed along with Fred. I kept screaming and asking what was going on, but no one answered. Believe me, guys, it was the worst day of my life. I was deeply embarrassed and ashamed of myself. Not only was I standing there in a soaked dress, ruined makeup, and bruised hand from falling and hanging to witness people give me dirty looks, I was handcuffed in front of 150 people. In that situation, my survival instincts made me beg Darian for help. I shamelessly kept on uttering words like, "Darian, help. You know I do not use drugs, Jay didn't even smoke, help me." But all I said went on deaf ears and Darian acted like he didn't even know me. I wasn't even given time to change into something better. I was just dragged away like a criminal. Of course, the rules were Hatcher. We were in a foreign state with nobody to help. For me, my husband would have been the best person to help. But how could he help me when I made a fool out of him in front of too many people? Well, after we fit to the station, more tea was spilled. Can you believe that the person who called the cops, or rather, the person who gave the cops hint, was Darian? Yes, he was the one who caused the drama. That was his own revenge, and dare I say that he got me badly. The whole event made me realize that I didn't actually know who Fred was. I knew he smoked and all, but I didn't know he used drugs. Okay, I won't lie. I'd noticed some odd behavior, but I brushed rational thoughts away and found those bad vibes addictive and bad boyish. I liked the risky vibe, but it landed me in deep trouble. Fred got a lawyer to defend us, and it was through that lawyer that we finally got some reasonable explanation as to why we got arrested. First of all, at that moment, I was extremely angry at Fred. I am still livid, but I had to pretend to be okay. I didn't have money to call a lawyer, he did, so I just had to play along. It took me by surprise when I discovered that Fred had purchased drugs from someone in New York when he came, and Darian had used that as an opportunity to bring him down. Can you believe that almost everyone was aware that Fred was a drug user except me? Or maybe I was just too smitten by him to notice. It finally made sense, and I understood why most of my friends warned me to stay away from him even before I got married. The source of his wealth and extravagant spending never made sense, but it finally did. So Darian was aware too, but he refused to tell me because he wanted to teach me a lesson. He used this information to keep an eye on Fred, and finally, he got Fred badly. If you're wondering why I got arrested, they claimed that I was suspected to have purchased it with him, but honestly, I know that's Darian's doing. I was eventually released, and I literally ran away. I took the next flight back home. Fred, on the other hand, was charged to court, but his lawyer later settled and he had to pay a huge fine. I clicked his number immediately because there was no way I wanted to have anything to do with an addict. But I came back home to chaos because my belongings were waiting for me in the garage. I tried to speak with Darian, but he refused to listen. Can you believe that? Darian acted rashly, if you ask me. What could have possibly made him go that far? He could have just warned me about Fred's addiction. Why did he have to put me through hell? As if the humiliation was not enough, he sent me out of the house knowing fully well that I had nowhere to do. Our friend group was still in New York for the after-wedding activities, and they were all so angry that no one even picked my call because of the scene I caused. Like I was the only one who caused drama. I need help on what to do because I'm sure Darian's next step is divorce, and that would completely break me beyond repair. Update. 4 months later, and I'm here with an update. No advice was able to save my marriage. But to be fair, you all only lashed out. No one actually tried to help me. Anyway, I was served divorce papers and I signed them because I didn't want any more embarrassment. I actually became a meme on our WhatsApp group chat because people recorded me on the floor. The whole incident made me know why true friends. Of course, I exited the group and ran back to my parents. They hate me right now, but they can't kick me out either. A part of me tried to settle with Fred, but my parents talked sense into me. Number 1, he set me up with that Mike thing. He ruined my marriage and caused all this. Number 2, I don't know if he's even a sane person. What if he decides to hit me one day and Blake's it on substance? And then number 3, he's never shown interest in commitment. So I guess I did end up risking my marriage for a few minutes of pleasure and useless fun. Darian never forgave me for making fun of him, and his revenge still haunts me till this day. I never thought I would get caught, but what's even worse is that I never thought the weight of my actions would crush me this hard.
I vowed that nothing will ever take me back to my estranged husband. I never wanted to have anything to do with him. I don't even want to breathe the same air with him. I didn't even want to set my eyes on him. I hated everything about him. My estranged husband is the perfect definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. I left my husband while he was sick and took our daughter. Yes, I did it and I don't have any regrets. But before you judge me, please listen to my story. Hi guys, my name is Samantha and I'm a 31-year-old baker. Well, I just started a bakery recently. I couldn't really bake before, but that story is not necessary. I'm married to my estranged husband, Dennis. We got married 11 years ago, but we have been separated for 5 years now. We have a 10-year-old daughter. Her name is Elizabeth. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Elizabeth is my whole world. She is the reason I still have the will to live. I want to give her the best. I don't want her to suffer the way I suffered as a child. That's why I will go to any length to give everything. I can give her my whole life without thinking about it. My daughter and I suffered so much in the hands of Dennis. My marriage to Dennis was a total disaster. Dennis and I got married when I was 20 years old. My father sold me off to Dennis because he couldn't pay the debt he owed him. Dennis is a businessman and so is my father. They did a business deal together and it went bad, so my dad married me off to Dennis, or rather he sold me off to him. In exchange, his debt was cleared. After the marriage or the business transaction, Dennis made my life a living hell. Dennis and my dad made me sign and document that I was never going to get divorced no matter what. Don't blame me, I was naive and I didn't even know the gravity of what I was doing. When Dennis made the offer to my dad, initially, he refused, but my stepmom convinced him to accept the offer so they will be debt-free. I was so stupid that I didn't know that Dennis had used our ignorance to his advantage. Things like that only happened in movies. How could it be possible that someone would trap another person into a divorce and there'll be no way to get out of it? I know you all are shaking your head and laughing at the possibility of that. Trust me when I say that when I think about it now, I laugh too. I laugh at how funny it sounds. I believed that I was stuck in a bad marriage forever and there was nothing I could do about it. Unknown to me that I was actually wasting time and deceiving myself. Dennis was very smart and he used that to his advantage in the marriage. He saw a family that didn't make sense and then he decided to use that to his own silly game's advantage. I lost my mom when I was 2 years old, so my dad remarried. After their wedding, my stepmom made sure I experienced hell on earth. She hated me for reasons best known to her. My dad was not always around, that's why he remarried. I was very close to my dad, but he remarried, all of that changed. He became distant because my stepmom always quarreled with my dad anytime she saw us together. She never wanted to see me talk to my dad. If she ever caught me talking to my dad, I would be in trouble. She would punish me by not giving me food. This made me scared. I was afraid of going to my dad and he was afraid of coming to me because he didn't want to upset his new wife. She controlled everything, even down to my dad's finances. She was the one that squandered all my dad's business money. She wears the most expensive and trending outfit. That was why my dad was in debt. She mismanaged my dad's fiancé and I became the sacrificial lamb. Things became worse when she gave birth to my stepsister Alora. I was completely neglected by my dad. Alora became my dad's favorite. Growing up, Alora got the best of everything, while I got the one she abandoned. My stepmom never bought anything for me. I always got what Alora rejected. I grew up without the love of a father and mother. So don't be surprised when my dad agreed to me off to his business partner. After the wedding, reality set in. My marriage to Dennis was just like being in bondage. He treated me like a maid. I wasn't allowed into his room. He would ask me to go upstairs anytime his friends visited. He wasn't proud of me. He never allowed me to go out with him. He was ashamed of me, I guess. He had maids before we got married, but immediately after our marriage, he sacked them. I became the official maid. I was sweeping and mopping a big house with a lot of rooms. He also made sure I washed his cars every morning. After that, I prepared his food. He made sure I was occupied with work 24/7. I was so engaged with house chores that I didn't even have time to feel sorry for myself. I cried to bed every day. I thought marriage was like a bed of roses like I read in novels. Nothing prepared me for what I went through in the hands of Dennis. He never took care of me. He didn't buy new clothes or shoes. He told me I didn't need any of that because I was always at home. He never spent a dime on me. I was always sad. The more I tried to get his love and affection, the more he hated me. I was married but very lonely. Every weekend was always tough for me. Dennis would invite his friends over. They would party all weekend. They would drink, smoke, and litter the floor. I would be cleaning after them because Dennis would beat me if he found stains on his tiles or floor. Dennis has about 3 washing machines, but he made me wash with my bare hands. He frustrated me every chance I got. Dennis was a rich man. He had people doing all this for him before I came, but he sacked them immediately I came. That is why I don't regret leaving him while he was sick and taking our daughter with me. I was tired of the marriage even before it began. Dennis made sure I didn't have any money. He would send the gatekeeper out for grocery shopping. He never allowed me to do it. Maybe he was because he was scared of me taking his money and running away. One day I got tired of everything and I decided to run back to my dad's house. Unfortunately for me, my dad was not around. My stepmom chased me back and asked me never to return again, that I was already a married woman. She saw the bruises on my body, but she turned a blind eye to everything. I thought those types of things only happened in movies, but surprisingly, it happened to me too, and I was very surprised. After I was sent away by my stepmom, I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I decided to go back to Dennis' place. He wasn't around when I left, and thankfully he hasn't returned back yet. Then the worst thing happened. What I dreaded the most happened. Can you guys guess what it was? I found out that I was pregnant. I'd taken a pregnancy test after missing my monthly flow, but I never thought I'd really be pregnant. I was pregnant. Yes, guys, I was pregnant. I was so devastated because I couldn't believe I was pregnant with his child. I wasn't happy. It felt like my whole world was crumbling. I didn't know what to do. Worst of all, I didn't have a mother, no father, and no friends. Even if I had friends, he wouldn't allow them to visit. My dad tried visiting several times, but he never allowed him in. Anyone I've told this story today wouldn't believe it. It just sounds easy to leave such a situation. But for a woman like me with no money who was broke, leaving just like that was very hard. Children are gifts from God, so I didn't understand why Dennis was not happy when I told him I was pregnant. He was indifferent about it. I thought he would be happy when I told him I was pregnant, but the reverse was the case. I thought the news of my pregnancy was going to bring us together and he would start training me right. But I was wrong. The only thing he said is I should better hope I'm carrying a baby boy. All through my pregnancy, it was hell. The first trimester was the hardest. The morning sickness was extreme. I was still cleaning the entire house all by myself in that condition. Sometimes Dennis will return back from his business trips with his girlfriends, and he would ask me to cook and serve them. He always told them I was his maid. Some of them asked him to sack me because I was pregnant, that I was good for nothing. Remembering everything is making me tear up right now. I was scared of what would happen when Dennis finds out I'm carrying a girl. I already did an ultrasound, but I was scared. I couldn't tell him. I begged the doctor to keep the gender of the baby from Dennis, and the doctor reluctantly agreed. Denise continued to maltreat me all through the pregnancy. There was never a day he looked at me with love. Soon I found out why he hated me with passion. Apparently, my father cheated him on their business deal. That was why he hated me. He was transferring the hatred he had for my father to me. Maybe it was because I'm the exact replica of my father. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just trying to understand why he hated me so much. I finally gave birth to my beautiful daughter on a Sunday. I felt joy I've never felt before. I couldn't explain what it was, but I was finally at peace. I felt some form of relief all of a sudden. For the first ever since I lost my mom, I never felt alone again. But I can't say the same for Dennis. He was so disappointed you could see it all over his face. He left me and the baby at the hospital. I spent 3 days at the hospital without anyone coming to see me. When the doctor got tired, he had to discharge me because I was occupying space and the bills were piling up. Honestly, I didn't want to leave the hospital. I was getting food at the hospital. The nurses were helping me with my baby when I was still in the hospital. Now it was just me and my little angel. I found it hard to move around because I had a cesarean section. The doctor and nurses warned me to get enough bed rest and that I shouldn't lift any heavy objects. I couldn't do that because I had no helping hands, which made my recovery journey hard. It took me 6 months to heal completely. That 6 months was hard for me. I had no one to assist me, but I survived it all. My baby and I survived. Dennis one day never addressed Elizabeth as his daughter. He also transferred the hatred he had for me to Elizabeth. But I knew I had to be strong for my daughter's sake. I couldn't cry any longer because Elizabeth would cry whenever he saw me crying. I was tired of everything. I couldn't even buy diapers for my baby. Things were that tough. Dennis refused to put our daughter in school. When Elizabeth was 3 years old, I begged Dennis to at least put her in one of the cheapest schools around, but he said he didn't have any money to spare. This was someone that had a charity organization for less privileged children, but here he was saying he didn't have any money to spare for his daughter's education. At that moment, it felt as if I had failed my daughter. I couldn't believe my daughter might end up like me. If I don't do something, I wished I had little money to use and enroll Elizabeth in school, but I had none. Dennis stopped me from working. One time I got a job at a beauty store and Dennis showed up and made a scene at the store. After that day, he warned me never to go work ever again. Dennis always maltreated Elizabeth. He got angry anytime he saw her. Dennis made the house hell for us. We couldn't even breathe well anytime he was around. Fear always gripped us every time we heard the sound of his car. We always tiptoe around the house cause you never know what you will do and Dennis will get mad. I always dreamt about leaving, but I had nowhere to go. My dad would not accept me because he is scared of what Dennis would do. If my mother was alive, I'm sure she would have damned all consequences and saved me from this abuser. I knew I wouldn't even be in that kind of situation in the first place if my mother was still alive. I'm a mother and I know I can go above and beyond for my child. I might be called a wicked person for saying this, but when Dennis fell sick and was brought home by one of his side chick, I felt relieved. I rushed him to the hospital. After a series of tests, the doctor told me Dennis was down with cancer. Fortunately for him, the cancer was in an early stage and that he needed a bone marrow transplant. I was confused. I didn't understand what he was saying, so he decided to break it down for me. He told me my daughter needed to get tested. If her bone marrow matches with Dennis, then she would have to undergo a surgery to save her father's life. Over my dead body, I shouted, I would never put my child through that pain, not for a worthless man. Dennis doesn't deserve that kind of charity from Elizabeth. He was never a good father to her. How could I let my poor daughter go through a life-changing surgery just to save a man that never considered her as a daughter? Dennis was never a good father to Elizabeth. He doesn't know anything about Elizabeth. Let me shock you guys, Dennis doesn't even know his daughter's name. He always addressed her as a. I couldn't believe what happened to me was happening to my child. We both never experienced the love of a father. I called Dennis' parents and informed them about Dennis' condition. His parents arrived and they were devastated. His parents loved me, but they were scared of Dennis. They couldn't do much for me. Everyone was scared of him, even his own parents. He wasn't a good son, neither was he a good father and husband. He was rude to everyone, even his own parents. He didn't have any iota of respect for them. His mom wanted to visit me when I gave birth, but he refused. He never allowed her to come and assist me. There was a time I reported to his parents that he was maltreating me. His parents called him to advise him. He got angry and ended the call. He stopped sending money to them for a whole year. Truth be told, I was very happy to see Dennis in that condition. If for anything, I was happy he could no longer abuse me anymore. He was helpless. I was happy seeing him fighting for his life. I was having fun with the whole situation. I couldn't believe what was happening. Everything felt like a dream. The same man that used to act like a semi-god is the one lying down helplessly. I didn't feel sorry for him one bit. While Dennis was sick, none of his friends or side chicks showed up at the hospital. I was the only one around taking care of him. It's true what they said, what goes around comes back around. That period was one of the best times of my life. Suddenly it felt as if I had been set free from a cage. I left Dennis at the hospital. I only visited him whenever I wanted. I was living my best life with Dennis' money until one day, I overheard Dennis making arrangements with the doctor so they would take my daughter's bone marrow without my consent. Thank goodness I came to the hospital on that fateful day. I quickly ran out of the hospital as fast as I could and ran home immediately. I took a lot of valuable things I could lay my hands on. I took gold, I took diamonds and lots of money and ran away. Yes, I abandoned my husband on his sick bed. I did it without thinking twice. I relocated with my daughter to Australia. I knew there was no way in the world Dennis would find us, that is, if he survived. Everything was going smoothly for us again, life was beginning to make sense. The first thing I did when we got to Australia was finding a good therapist for my daughter. I didn't want to raise a damaged child. Elizabeth and I had been through a lot. The money I stole from Dennis' safe was more than enough. I made sure my daughter lacked nothing. I gave her the very best. She attended the best school. I was finally able to enroll her in the school. Elizabeth was very intelligent. Everyone loved her. She was too intelligent for her age. Sometimes, I wondered if she was really my daughter. She always made straight A's in class. She was just too smart. I regretted ever marrying Dennis, but I never regretted having Elizabeth. She was the puzzle that was missing in my life. I never felt lonely after I had Elizabeth anymore. If for anything, I became stronger and started fighting to live. Elizabeth was my everything. She was my daughter, best friend, father, mother, husband. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think God decided to compensate for my pain. That's why He gave me the best daughter in the whole world. While in Australia, I also started schooling. You know, I never finished college. While my mates were in school learning, I was at home doing chores. I was in college before my dad made me get married to Dennis. Dennis promised my dad I would continue my schooling, but he never fulfilled that promise. He stopped me from schooling immediately after marriage. I went to school and graduated. I studied law in one of the prestigious schools and graduated with good results. I started practicing law professionally and I became one of the best lawyers in town. I never lost any cases. I was living my best life. Life was beginning to make sense again. Elizabeth and I spent 5 years in Australia. Elizabeth was 5 years when we left. Elizabeth never for once asked me about her father's whereabouts. She didn't ask me any questions. For someone that was so inquisitive, she never for once asked me any questions about why we ran away, and I was grateful for that. I never heard anything from Dennis or my father again. I didn't even know whether Dennis survived. Well, I don't care if he survived or not. I continued developing myself and my daughter. I never stopped learning. I kept acquiring more knowledge. I built myself with every resource I could lay my hands on. I was preparing myself for the war ahead. I knew we would one day go back to the States. I will have to go back and divorce Dennis so I could finally be free. Dennis and I were still married. According to the documents he made me sign, I couldn't divorce him or else I'd have to pay a hefty sum. I'm not sure those documents were even illegal, but lack of confidence never made me do the right thing. So guys, I was still married to him. So I had all the right to come claim his entire assets. Before running away, I put everything in place. I took all the important documents I could lay my hands on before running away. Leaving Dennis on the sick bed and running away with our daughter was one of the best decisions I have ever made. It gave me the opportunity to build myself. It gave me enough time to grow, enough time to fix my broken self-esteem. I was no longer the little puppet he played with it. I had become strong and independent. I was doing well for myself. While in Australia, I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity to return back to the States. I wanted to make a grand entrance. One day, while we were listening to the news, I was busy with my phone scrolling through social media when I got a text from one of my friends. She told me she got to know that Dennis survived cancer after his brother gave him his bone marrow. Anyways, it didn't matter whether he survived or not. What mattered to me was how to take everything for him. I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity. I called Elizabeth and told her to prepare that we would have to return back. She was not happy about that. She begged for us to stay there, but I told her we needed to go back to her. She needed to take over her father's property. She told me she doesn't need any of that, but I knew she didn't understand what I was saying. She was still a baby. She was just 10 years old then. I knew one day, when she is a lot older, she will thank me for that decision. I'm just doing everything possible to position her in the right place. One thing I vowed to myself was that my daughter would not go through everything I went through. I promised myself I would make her strong and independent, and that no man will ever be able to treat her the way Dennis treated me. One of the reasons Elizabeth didn't want us to leave was because she was scared. She knew how life was for us back then and how it is now. She also didn't want to lose her friends, but I assured her we would return after we secured her future. Finally, we got back to the States. Coming back to the States brought back old memories. All of a sudden, everything came flashing back at me. This very place felt uncomfortable for me. I started having a double mind. I wanted to go back to Australia. Old fears were coming back, but looking at my daughter, I had to be strong. I had to fight for my daughter's future. I didn't want to be a total failure like my dad. I refused to be a weakling. I decided to face my fears. Elizabeth and I lodged in a hotel, and I was just waiting for the right opportunity to announce my presence to Dennis. Soon the right opportunity came. The UN was hosting a ball in honor of Dennis for his humanitarian service to the less privileged. That was the perfect opportunity one had, and I took it. What do you guys think happened next? Hi guys, it's me again. So the ball was strictly by invitation, and I didn't have an invite. But I was allowed in after I told them Dennis I was a beneficiary of Dennis humanitarian service. The ball was big, all his acquaintances were present. I took a seat and sat down quietly waiting for my time. Seeing Dennis smiling from ear to ear made me furious. Here he was, my abuser, pretending and acting like a saint. When Dennis spotted me, he got scared and pulled me to the side so he could ask what I was doing there. He was very shocked to see me. I couldn't believe that I'd fallen for his tricks before and that I let myself get confused by the games he tried to play. I made myself believe so many lies. How could I think there was a document that could make me never ask for divorce? I just didn't have the courage to look for a proper lawyer to help me out in court. Now that I'm a lawyer, I know better. That's the only reason why he could trample all over me and act like he was high and mighty. I disgraced Dennis on a night he was supposed to be honored, and I don't regret it one bit. He didn't expect to see me at all, and he made sure to make that clear. He accused me of leaving him when he was in his toughest moments only for me to come back just so I could take revenge. I didn't even need to talk before he understood why I was present. He was threatened by my presence, and it was obvious. Dennis and I spent a lot of time arguing and having a lot of back and forths. He wasn't ready to back down, and so was I. I had to tell him how much I hated him before I spat on the floor and left him standing there. I still get goosebumps anytime I think about what happened because it was hard for me to go through all that alone. Standing up to someone who hurt you before is really hard, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. I knew that the first step I had to take was to get out of the marriage. I was still legally married to him, and I didn't want it to stay that way, so I made the conscious decision to get out of the narrative without incurring any legal problems. I knew that what my father and I had been scared of before was just stupid threats. We were just poor, and that's why we didn't have the common sense to know that Dennis had just been trying to use our head. He just wanted to play mind games with us, and we fell for it. I still can't believe that there was a time in my life when I thought that I couldn't get a divorce if I wanted to. It took a much-needed break and becoming a lawyer for me to understand just how easy it was to get a divorce if I really wanted one. Ignorance can be bliss sometimes, but it takes courage to be smart. As a lawyer, I did a lot of research and knew I could divorce Dennis without paying a dime. I can even sue him for making me sign a paper under duress. The reason Dennis is scared of divorce is because he doesn't want me to get half of his property. That was why he forced me to sign a paper. Well, I'm back now, this time a lot smarter and bolder, and I'm ready to divorce him and take half of his money. I served Dennis the divorce papers. He was shocked. He reminded me of the paper he made me sign years ago, and I told him I could sue him for making me sign a document under duress. I told him it was illegal. I gave him two options: either he signed the divorce papers, or I sued him to court for making me sign a document under duress, and he might end up spending 5 years in prison. Dennis got scared. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. I guess the thought of him losing half of his property to me humbled him. Immediately, he fell on his knees and asked me to forgive him for everything he has ever done. He asked me to give our marriage a second chance. He said he was ready to be a good husband and, most importantly, a good father. I was too smart to fall for that crocodile tears. The 20-year-old me would have fallen for his tricks, but I'm a lot smarter now. I know what he is doing. I'm very familiar with that act. It's been 5 years ever since I left Dennis, and he hasn't changed a bit. He was still as cunning and manipulative as ever. When he saw my mind was made up, he took his car keys and walked out. You guys would not believe what happened next. Dennis returned back and continued pleading, this time around with my dad. Dennis brought my dad to plead with him. I couldn't even believe my eyes, how my dad fell for his manipulation. I haven't seen my dad ever since I left for Australia 5 years ago. I couldn't understand why he decided to appear before me just like that, asking me to forgive a man that almost ruined my life. It was at that point I realized anyone can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a dad. People like Dennis and my dad have one thing in common: they were never a good father to their children. Anyways, I turned him down too. Dennis was trying to change my mind by all means possible. He went as far as getting me a new car, but I refused to be swayed by his antics. He started coming back home early. He even started taking Elizabeth out for ice cream. My innocent daughter was happy. She thought her father was beginning to love her. I knew he had not changed and was only pretending. He was only trying to change my mind. Dennis tried his best to change my mind, but when he saw my mind was made up, he decided to sign the divorce papers. He was scared of going to jail, I guess. I couldn't believe it was finally happening. The moment I have been waiting for is here. Dennis has finally signed the divorce papers, and I'm about to be free. It felt like a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a while, I felt freedom. Hi guys, it's me again. I didn't know how tough divorce proceedings can be. The whole thing was exhausting. The entire divorce process was hectic. Dennis tried to buy the jury over, but he failed. I knew Dennis would not back down easily. Dennis employed the services of 3 senior lawyers. He told me I was not going to get a penny from him. He was so confident that he would win against me. Well, I was a bit scared too. Who wouldn't after seeing the lawyers he employed? I was able to calm myself down and just trust the system. His lawyers tried all they could to make sure I didn't get a penny, but I'm glad justice prevailed at last. Dennis and I finally got divorced and I got half of his property. That is, I got half of everything he owned. You guys needed to have seen him that day. He cried hot tears. I'm not exaggerating, guys. He cried like a baby that lost his candy. I also got custody of our daughter. Dennis was also asked to start paying for child support. Dennis was fighting for the custody of our daughter because he didn't want to pay for child support. After the divorce, I decided to go start all over again in another city. I relocated permanently to Chicago with Elizabeth. I sold all the houses and assets I got from Dennis. I didn't want anything that would remind me of my bitter past. I invested for my daughter's future. Dennis was still paying the child support every month, but you never can't tell what might happen tomorrow. Dennis is unpredictable. I got a job in a law firm and I became a licensed lawyer in America. Life was beginning to make sense again. I decided to further my education while working too. I kept developing myself. I made sure I gave Elizabeth the best. She attended the best school and always came out top of her class. Sometimes, I wondered what I ever did right to deserve such a beautiful and intelligent daughter. Dennis never for once visited us in Chicago. He never even asked Elizabeth, but always sent money every month. I guessed he never forgave me for taking half of his money. He went around spreading false rumors about me. He told anyone that cared to listen how I abandoned him on his bed and ran away with our daughter, and how I came back again to divorce him and take half of his money. Truth be told, initially it affected me because people judged me without hearing my own side of the story. I was hurt, I wouldn't even lie. That was even one of the reasons I relocated from Los Angeles to Chicago. Dennis was hell-bent on destroying my name. As time went on, I no longer cared about what Dennis and his gossip mongers had to say about me. I ignored them, and soon enough, they got tired and frustrated. As for my dad, my stepmom kept pushing him into debt. I heard my stepsister Alora got married to an old rich man. I'm not surprised though, knowing how greedy my stepmom is. I knew she can sell off her own daughter too, just like she did with me. She is one of the most selfish beings I know. I don't even know how she sleeps at night. I mean, I'm a mother and I don't see myself doing that to my child. My dad finally got tired of her flamboyant lifestyle and sent her away. I wished he did that earlier. I wouldn't have married Dennis in the first place. But I believe everything happens for a reason. If I had not married Dennis, I wouldn't have had my daughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth is my will to live. She is my best friend and everything. I work so hard because of her. I want her to know what it means to be a strong, independent, and hard-working woman. Elizabeth finally graduated from high school. It was a proud moment for me. She dedicated her speech to me. She described me as her superhero. Dennis got married again, this time not to a naive 20-year-old girl, but to a businesswoman like him. She divorced him 3 months later. Is not everyone that could put up with what I endured in the hands of Dennis. That is my story, guys. Now I understand the saying that you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only way. Nothing prepared me for everything life threw at me, but I'm grateful for everything. The hardship I went through made me stronger, and I'm grateful I survived it all. Thanks, and